right. So I would like to start off by introducing our guests tonight. I will start with Nyima, and Nyima Jadama is a print radio journalist, a TV presenter. Being in Germany since 2015, she reports, among other things, about realities of life of refugees in Germany and used to train young refugee journalists. Since the end of May 2020, she has completed an 18-month traineeship at the Medienanstalt Berlin-Brandenburg, at the training and community broadcaster Alex Berlin TV. She's currently working on her own talk show, Nyima's Bantamba, a bilingual English-German show that reports on migration, women, empowerment, and culture. Nyima is currently working as a social facility manager at Gangway e.V., Soziale Straßenarbeit. In addition, she is an activist for women empowerment and deportation. Welcome, Nyima. And to my left, I'm very pleased to welcome Jennifer Kamau. Jennifer Kamau is a co-founder of International Women's Space, an anti-racist feminist group consisting of refugee and migrant women as well as women without these experiences. The group was formed during the occupation of Oranienplatz and the Gerd Hauptmann School in Berlin-Kreuzberg. International Women's Space fosters solidarity and cooperation among migrant women, publishes books, and organizes campaigns, protests, and conferences on the topics of seeking asylum and migrant women's struggles. In 2017, International Women's Space organized Als ich nach Deutschland kam. And International Women's Space publishes also books, and we have 3 of them here. So I think Jennifer will definitely tell us a bit more about the publishing work, the self-publishing work of International Women's Space. So a warm welcome to you also, Jennifer. So as we mentioned in our introduction, together with Natalie, we draw inspiration from the poem Grenzenlos und Unverschämt by Ayim from 1990. And I think it's only right to also use this opportunity tonight to read this poem, which was published in the wake of the fall of the Berlin Wall, which we, I think, also in our research, together with Saskia and Natalie, thought is a very good starting point, since it's been also, I mean, you can make the argument to kind of compare these historical moments, back then the fall of the Berlin Wall, and now the pandemic, which we thought are oftentimes moments that really challenge ideas about belonging and identity, and also amplify certain structural and societal inequalities. And so I would really like to start off this evening and this conversation with you both by reading the poem Grenzenlos und Unverschämt, ein Gedicht gegen die Deutsch-Einheit. Ich werde trotzdem afrikanisch sein, auch wenn ihr mich gerne deutsch haben wollt. Ich werde trotzdem deutsch sein, auch wenn euch meine Schwärze nicht passt. Ich werde noch einen Schritt weiter gehen, bis an den äußersten Rand, wo meine Schwestern sind, wo meine Brüder stehen, wo unsere Freiheit beginnt. Ich werde noch einen Schritt weiter gehen und noch einen Schritt weiter und wiederkehren, wann ich will, wenn ich will, grenzenlos und unverschämt bleiben. So, I think this is maybe a good time to kind of start this conversation. I would like to ask Nyima first, if we think about the title Radical Feminist Solidarity, I think especially in this time, what would you say is, or how would you see or define, also in context of your work, what would feminist solidarity look like for you, and what has been your experience in that regard?
Thank you very much. Good evening to you all. In regards to radical feminism, and also in contrast to my work, I would say, I mean, the pandemic has actually affected everybody. I mean, it's a worldwide pandemic, and personally, it has a lot of effect in my work, in my private life. The issue of identity and belonging, this is something that we have to fight. I mean, sometimes I'm like, I think we have to fight for the rest of our life. I mean, the quote unquote from the Gedicht from where she said, I will forever be, I will always be seen as an African, even if you guys trust up ihr mich als Deutsch haben wollte. So when I read this, I reflect back and I am like, since I arrived in Germany, it's like, I would always forever be a migrant or a refugee, even though if I really become a part of the society, and which I think would not happen because the issue of us and them has been existing, and it might, or it will forever be existing. So reflecting back, sometimes last day when I was doing my voluntariat, so I got the opportunity to do an internship with different media organizations, both print and electronic. And I could remember we had a trip in München at one of the big televisions. We had like 2 weeks there. And we met the CEO and we had an exchange talks and all that. And one thing he told me, and I would forever, this stays with me and it will forever stays. And he said, you guys are like not German language speakers, like zweite Sprache. So it's not something that is easy to be a part of the German media. He said, if I should be honest with you, you are not a part of the media and you might not even be a part of the media. Because first, it's not your language. That has to do with identity. And then the issue of belonging comes in. That is, you have a status. And sometimes I'll be looking at myself, do I have a status written on me as a migrant? And this is why I have been having difficulties in belonging. So he said, as a German, if he is one and I did like to be like him, I have to double up, to be twice better than him, to come where he is. And then I'll be like, okay, what does that mean? And during the process of this program, I went to different organizations as well. And then I realized, okay, this is coming what he told me. I have to be 2 times better, not just once, but 1 time better, but 2 times better because of the language barrier, because of the identity, because of trying to belong. And then the issue also comes in, you are seen as this migranten that is parked in a special space or given special assignment that has to do with, for example, migration. And this is why I also focus more on reporting the realities and lives of migrants, refugees, and so on. And then some would try to tell me, okay, it's because you are sogenannte Experten. I don't see myself as an expert in this context. For me, is the issue of belonging and the issue of identity, because if I should always be giving a special assignment on the issue that belongs on me, so where am I developing on the other part? So then this is something I think that we've been fighting, and it is a long way, and I don't see it anytime finishing soon. Yeah.
So what I hear from what you're saying, and I think a lot of us also that are here in the room can maybe also share some of the sentiment and also the experiences that you have made whenever you interact with, you know, certain institutions, and also your experience that you did in the traineeship, you know, in part of that program. So oftentimes what I ask myself, and I think would also be interesting also in regards to International Women's Space, is that, and you also mentioned that, you know, like the constant fight, right? Of also or taking more into consideration kind of where are the moments where we gain strength, you know? Where are the moments where we can, you know, take care of one another? And I think this is also part of that the idea also of this title, you know, in a certain way, is to have or think about really also in this moment about you know, questions and also systems of care that I think in this pandemic has also to a certain degree broken down. You know, I think a lot of people have experienced maybe for the first time the vulnerabilities of themselves, you know, for the fact that the systems that they relied on were kind of crumbling down. You know, there was a lot of isolation, you know, all of these things. And I think this is also something that even is even more violent in the context, for instance, of camps. So I think what I would like to ask you both and also Jennifer is where do you see those spaces of care, the space of also gaining strength and on building up resilience, because those experiences, as you have explained it yourself, can be very violent, you know, and very harsh.
I just actually wanted to add the issue of care and solidarity within us. I think it's also lacking. I always say this is something that we ourselves should work on first. Because, for example, as a Black woman, if we are not keeping in solidarity to each other, if we are not each other's brothers and sisters keeper, then I don't see us achieving our goals. Because I'll give another example. During my internship as well, I was at an institution, and there were Afro-Germans. I mean, so because I often not see that when I am in big institutions during my traineeship, and I'm like, okay, I'm the only Black person. I mean, my identity, it's always unique, because then perhaps I'm the only Black person, the only Muslim with a veil, and also with this title of a migrant. And when I saw this girl, and I'm like, oh, she's Black, so maybe I would be able to freely express myself, I mean, to talk to her. But unfortunately, it was the other way around. She wasn't what I expected that I would get from her, this solidarity, this care, oh, she's my sister because of the same color. So then I'm like, I think the Afro-Touch people, sometimes I think they see themselves different from us. So the issue of care and solidarity, I think it's also something that we should really look into within ourselves. Because for me, the expectation was high that, okay, because I am someone, I don't easily rush in terms of approaching people and all that, because I want to be sure if it's okay with you to communicate with you. So if I see someone like my color with you, so I'm like, oh, we understand each other's trait. So this experience I had made me to step back a little bit and keep thinking, okay, how do I really belong even within the company of the people that I think I share the same identity?
Jen, I mean, I have something to say about that, but I want to open it up to Jennifer too.
Thank you very much for this possibility to be here with you. I will first start by complimenting what Nyima is saying, that the amount of invisible work we have to do just to be visible is a lot. And what my Ayim is talking about is how our bodies are perceived, our Black bodies are perceived. And these perceptions are always, there's always a reaction, because when white people just feel what they feel because of our presence, then the consequences are very detrimental on our bodies. So there are things like racial profiling, like racist attacks. And this, when this becomes like a normal day thing that you have to live with it every day, if you're not strong enough, then you start to internalize this hate. And it also comes to the topic of what we become when we migrate. Either we become refugees or we become migrants. But when the white people migrate to our countries, then it's a whole different perspective. Either they are expatriates, They are missionaries, they are tourists, or they are investors. You know, these differences create a lot of difficulties for us. And when I think of how freely goods coming from Africa can enter European countries, and my body cannot even be allowed to enter in these countries, then it projects how extreme our bodies are perceived. And when I talk about people coming in and out of our countries, a very good example is that I come from Kenya. It's part of the Commonwealth country. And when the British left our country, they left a constitution that facilitated their coming in and out with a lot of freedom. And this has been, it's only in 10 years that, the last 10 years that we have had to change this. So I still have to apply for a visa, even if Kenya is part of the Commonwealth country. So these treaties are not to facilitate, or they have no equal base, but it's to facilitate exploitation, so to be said. So that is what I would add on to what Maya Ayim is talking about in her poem.
Just to add a little bit on to the issue of belonging and identity, I mean, with regards to my experience, it's not because, like if you look at it, one might think, okay, it was difficult belonging in a wide circle thing. I didn't find it difficult belonging. I mean, what I am trying to say, not belonging, but then the welcoming was super okay. It was just the issue of having this status in you in a very friendly, positive way, that you wouldn't feel bad that they have given you a status that you would live on within them. And at some point, I think I could remember, I was chatting with my colleague and I told her, I think it's a good opportunity because then I have something to write or something to talk about. Because if not, they might not give me any other assignment. And I could remember at one institution, it was a newspaper, I was insisting that I want to also report on issues that are happening in Berlin, not just issues that are happening about refugees and migrants. It was quite a very, very good, interesting experience, and then I think I learned a lot. I must admit that not the atmosphere, but the people were very welcoming and very nice. Not to try to directly show that, okay, this is what you are. That was only at one institution, because I mean, I think I went to more than 5 or 6 big institutions, and at one of the institutions was like, they were actually particularly interested for me to do a report about my journey, how I came to Germany, how I live here, how I get into the media, and I think that was frustrating for me. Because then, compared to another institution where I went to, they were like, you are not here as a migrant or as a refugee. We see you as a journalist and we will give you assignments that we are doing. So I had to use this excuse to tell this editor that I want to be seen as a normal journalist, but not somebody who would just be reporting on issues like this. And I think these are experiences that Jennifer said, if we are not strong enough, if we are not determined enough, it deters us in pursuing our career. And personally, I think it breaks me down a lot, plus the language barrier and all that. And I'll be like, I think I am quitting because this is not helping at all. If I could not have the opportunity to do my work in the language that I can, English, then it's not working. But then I hope we will get there.
Yeah, I think what you have mentioned, I mean, the fact that you kind of are being subscribed a certain label or certain image, and then also kind of relive this history, you know, that was part, or that is part of your history, of course, but that doesn't define your identity as a whole, you know. I think there's more facets of that, and I think this is one of the biggest sacrifices, I would say, of racist structures and racism in general, I think, is the absolute breakdown of complexities. The fact that so many people of us are not allowed this complexity, of it's basically certain broad strokes that are used to kind of describe our different experiences. And I think this is also kind of connecting to what you were mentioning earlier, when you had this experience with another Black person and having this hope of, connecting, which is, of course, the first intention that you would have. But I think there's also this element of understanding clearly that, yes, we share something, but there's also differences in regards to gender, class, sexual orientation, it's just a lot of things that also come into play at that point. So, but connecting to this complexities and also, speaking for yourself and also telling the stories that you like to tell, I think it's also important to maybe, draw a comparison, or not a comparison, but kind of connecting both of your practices also, which are very rooted in journalism, in orality, and also the use of social media to tell your stories. And I found it really interesting also in the research to kind of see the way in which you make really use of these skills and tools to infiltrate, and to enter spaces and make room for yourselves. So in the case of International Women's Space, it's been conferences as well as the podcast and the books. And in your case, Nyima, it's the upcoming show that you're going to produce and also your journalistic work. And I think this is maybe something that is also different in comparison to earlier migrant movements. I was just talking to Jennifer about this earlier. How would you see that the use and the use of these skills or these tools have shaped or affected also your work and also the creation of community? I think this is very powerful. Also keeping in mind with regulations like Residenzpflicht, what really pushes people more to be more isolated, or that at least makes it difficult to create community. How do you see that? How do you see publishing and journalism in general and also podcasting as a tool for that? Nyima, you want to start?
When you mention the topic of Residenzpflicht, it comes back to when we were founding the organization. And at the time, at the Oplatz, we were confronted by the Residenzpflicht, the voucher system, the lack of permission to work, the lack of permission to study, the lack of the isolation. All of these things are things we were fighting. And the first thing we noticed is that most of the media that covered the story about Oranienplatz always projected the chaos of Oranienplatz, and not only very few highlighted the reason there was a protest camp. And with that, of course, it is not strange, because we have also known from our countries where we come from, when our history is written by white people, and how the effect it has for the rest of our lives until these moments when we begin to correct. So for us, the first thing was to start documenting. And documenting was very vital, because in that time in 2012, I later got to learn that there were groups like the Caravade and the Voice, which had been fighting for the same things like 15, now it's about 21 years ago. But because there was no literature, there was nowhere you could do research and see this kind of history. And if there was, it was just someone who touched it very partially. And the first thing I acknowledged is that I will be responsible for writing my history, so that when people come here and they start researching about groups of refugees and migrants, they will find it. So it's that responsibility that I took very seriously. And that's why we publish books, we organize conferences, We do podcasts so that we can build our own archives. There is power in the tools that we use.
I'll just start from there. There is power in the tools we use, not just in the tools we use, but there is power in the voice and in our voices, and there is power in the way we tell our stories. And so I'll start from when I was working as a media educator and a moderator with Radio Dreieckland in Freiburg. So we tried to create a space where refugees and migrants would tell their stories, because it has to do with, especially, I mean, I came in 2015, normally I make jokes of this, that there was a social worker, a German social worker, who looked at me and said, Nyima, unfortunately, you are the wrong refugee. So she said this because I came in 2015 at the peak of the refugee crisis, just exactly in summer, when refugees were entering in Germany anyhow. And I came from Gambia. Unfortunately, she would tell me, you're a wrong refugee from a wrong country, you came at the wrong time. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And then there was a lot of reports from the media about refugees and what refugees were doing. And I came here without understanding any German word. I started to learn German here. And every morning when I listen to radio, I think I pick up 2 words that I understand. That is Flüchtling, Leute, Heimat, and Heimat. And then I think I tried to search this, but I was somehow confused with the meaning. So I had to ask my teacher, what is Flüchtling? And she just looked at me and laughed and said, you do is Flüchtling. And I was like, okay, so the media is referring to me every day, and what did I do wrong? So at the end, you realize journalists and the media are reporting what actually favors them. But in the reality, I always ask myself, are they doing the research, going deeper down to tell the stories? Like, for example, in the refugee camps, I think there was only one story that I had a refugee, a journalist that went to a refugee camp and stays there for a week, live the normal life of a refugee. She planned for I think 4 weeks, but after 5 days, she said she can't anymore because of the situation. And then when I got this job, we created this safe space for refugees where we will train refugees, even without journalist experience, to tell their stories and do radio themselves. So it was called Our Voice. It's still running, actually. It was a multilingual, it is a multilingual radio, so in 6 different languages. So this was in a sense that refugees would not have the difficulty in understanding what is being reported about them in German or in English, but then they have the opportunity to understand it in other languages. And I think this is something that also motivates me to say, okay, I am going to do more to inform my community, because if this is the identity I have and this is where I actually belong in, and I got this opportunity to be there, I see no reason why I should create a safe space for them and inform them and allow them to do it themselves, because I think our voices are powerful. And so there is a street word, like a code in my language that says, not my language, actually, it's Senegal. Netal is a language. That is, a story is well told from the person's mouth. And so I came and then I was reporting, and because for me, it is an easy access between me and the community of these people to easily get to know what is going on in a language that they understand. So this is why I created this, so the Bantaba. Bantaba is actually local, so it's my language in Gambia. It's like a forum where we sit down and talk about everything. But we focus is on migration, women empowerment, and culture. So for me, this is a space where migrants and refugees issues can be featured and talk about by themselves as well, not just me as moderating or producing, but having them. So you might not actually find it online at the moment, but you can try it in November. We are currently on post-production, producing contents, talking about different issues, racial profiling, refugee issues, house building, and so on. So the impact that my work, for example, is doing is, because if I circulate it, if they don't understand it, they can easily reach out to me, either Facebook or any other means, to say, hey, this is what you write, but I don't really understand what is going on, so I can explain. So for me, I think this is a great impact that the other community, the other side of the people would understand really what is going on, not to struggle on the, okay, it's in German or it's in English and I don't know what it's been written or said about it.
So what I hear from that also with what you said is really like adapting also the tools and adapting the strategies in order to make sure that you reach the people that you want to reach. If that's, in that case, the language, for instance, you know, or if it's, in your case, you're publishing the books or really actively working on an archive. And I think it's really interesting because that, for me at least, seems like to be the red thread, the common thread that is like going through all the events that we had so far, that really it feels like there's a warning sign, you know, that you really have to make sure that you work actively on building this archive. Otherwise, you know, these stories are so fragile and so easily, you know, pushed to the margins, so that people really are not...
Or whitewashed.
And whitewashed, that's true. So one thing that I also wanted to ask about that is in terms of like adaptability and, you know, making or, yeah, rethinking certain strategies, from the experience of a Black woman, you know, the intersection of race and gender. The experience that I have made, I don't know, maybe you can correct me, is that from like workshops that I have given also, is like there are certain questions and issues that that can oftentimes only be discussed in safe spaces among other Black women. Have you made that kind of experience? And also, I think in your podcast, I think there was also certain questions that you have also discussed in this regard. It would be really nice if you could share that with us, also from the beginning of International Women's Space, how that happened. Because from the research that I have done, it was really created also as a safe space and also as a space that you can just easily enter whenever you have questions or need information that is not so easily accessible for people.
I think the idea of safe space is very important for women generally, but more so for women of color, because then we are coming from a very different culture. And the white culture perceives our culture as either backward or, how do you call it, very barbaric or something. And sometimes when we come to our spaces, it's a way of drawing strength for ourselves. And what we have tried to do as International Women's Space is actually not only create spaces for ourselves, but build our own community. And then there is a space, and then there is a community, and this community, it includes like refugees and migrants, and also white people who are very reflected on what they are doing. So by building our community is another form of trying to exist in a white society. And by this, we form networks that we can trust to begin with. And by this, we are able to be ourselves, to unmask, because there's what the society expects us to be. There's what the society is dictating us to be. But by our safe spaces, we can be what we want to be.
Yeah, I think the issue of safe spaces, I mean, I'll just allude on that. It's as important as we could imagine, because it is a space where migrants and refugees feel safe to express themselves freely, openly, without any hesitation or any second thought, because then they feel, okay, I am talking to somebody not just with the same color, but someone that I share the same culture, the same thoughts and perspective, the same ideas and perhaps the same language. So, for example, I think I came across a migrant women group called Fem Dynamic, and those women, I just love what they do. They're Muslim women, mostly with kaftu, and for me that was really new. I mean, I came across them through my research in terms of having to get topics on how to include them on my talk show. And then I met the founder and we discussed, and I was at their event, and there were lots of women from different countries, mainly from Africa. And they were just discussing, they just talk a lot of things, and I was interested on why Muslim women and why with a veil. So they're like, because they didn't feel included. For them, diversity is just diversity, but they don't really see the diversity that people are talking about because they are not included. I personally, I was rejected from a job because of my veil, because of my religion, not in Berlin. And so I was like, this is interesting. So for them, if they are together, they wouldn't not have to feel this feeling that I am the only person in this room with a veil. I am the only person in this room as a black woman or as a Muslim. So you will not have the fear of someone walking to you in summertime. I'm like, are you really okay? Are you not feeling hot with this? Which is super normal. And so for them, it is a space where they can express themselves without somebody having to identify them, without somebody having to look at them as a different person, it's just to be safe. And I think it's important. And then the issue of solidarity and care comes in. If we can continue such things like this, and of course with whites that reflect and see themselves as we are all one and be part of us, I think the world would become a better world.
So we have now the opportunity to also take questions from the audience. There's 2 microphones. If anyone has a question, it's now the time to shine and ask the question if you want to. Otherwise, we would just continue. Okay. No question in the audience? There's one.
Hi, thank you for this. My question is for Jennifer. I understand that your last publication is a couple of years ago, as well as the conference. So I'm just interested in what International Women's Space is planning next.
We are doing quite a lot. For example, during the time of the corona, before the lockdown came, we have a project of visiting the Hinds and breaking their isolation. So we virtually go physically to the Hinds and try to share information that is relevant and is needed, especially in this time of very many deportations. But then came the pandemic. And with the pandemic, the Hinds are in very isolated places. So the people in the Hinds are supposed to be in isolation. So come the pandemic. So this was isolation 2 times because of the lockdown and the normal isolation that they lived. And for us, it's so important what was going on in these Hinds, because every information about the lockdown and from the Ministry of Health that came, they were the last people to get it. And we were afraid that these are our friends, and if something happened to them, then we'd get desperate because we were also being locked down. So what we did, always in times of weird situations, we always invent something to keep us going. So we actually transformed every woman that we had contact to into a reporter. We introduced the audio reports. And these audio reports, we asked them to send them to us. And by the way, the privileges we had during Corona, the people in the Ayim did not have. This is one thing, because isolation was a privilege, that people would shut the door and be on their own in their safe spaces. It was not possible to do isolation in the Ayim because the Ayim are shared spaces. People are 5 in a room, and in these spaces, the toilets and the bathrooms are shared. So that was a privilege to even isolate to have spaces in the Ayim. The other thing was even with this internet, that the fact that you could not go anywhere to do the shopping or to buy this good happen, then we realized it's weird. These things people take for granted, these privileges people assume were actually basics that even the women were struggling with. So even in the process of sending these audios, we had to find ways of sending them credit. You know, something that is very basic, like Wi-Fi in a lager, was not available. So we received these reports, we distorted the voices so that somebody could not be identified, and we shared them on our website. And anybody who was asking for information about people in the Ayim, we referred them to the website. So we did our work of in bringing the impact of the COVID-19 to the Ayim. So as a result of that, then there was a lot of emergency COVID funding, and we were approached by a certain organization and told, we have resources, do you want to do something with about the COVID? And then we thought of doing the podcast that now we are doing with the We Are Born Free Radio, which at the moment are the ones that we are focused on, and also the audio reports from the Ayim. Now, we have formed alliances with other migrant communities, and on the 8th of March and 25th of November, we take to the streets because the 8th of March is International Women's Day, and 25th of November is the Day Against Violence on Women. So we organize demonstrations on these 2 days. And now we already in the beginning of preparing for the 25th November demonstrations. And it was a decision we made to do differently from the block of white women, because when we march together, we get lost in that space. Our demands are completely different. Our demands are completely different. We are demanding for very basic things, that the lagers should be closed down. We are demanding that we should have health. We are demanding a right to stay. These demands are completely different from what the white women are demanding. But what we do, in the end, we end the demonstration together because it's a Women's Day. But then we have ensured that still we take our spaces even in the streets.
Any more questions? No? All right. So since the time is already passing a bit and we have to finish on time, I really, really, really like to thank you both for this wonderful conversation that we had, and I think it will definitely continue in a different time, at a different space. Yeah, thank you so much for your incredible work, and I would highly recommend to stay updated also with Nyma's upcoming TV show, as well as the International Women's Space and the podcast that is published weekly, I think? 2 times a week even, all right. Okay, 2 times a month, all right. So thank you so much. And now I think I would like to give you a little outlook on what is happening tomorrow. We will have a concert. Tomorrow is our music day, as I always describe it. We have a concert by Frank Bedin, and then after a concert by The Swag, we will start at 8, again here at How 1, and also we will have a radio session that is going to be published, and this is all happening with the incredible support of We Are Born Free Empowerment Radio, and yeah, that's basically it for tonight. I'm happy to see you soon again, And we will continue our program until the 4th of October. Thank you so much.